Hello folks, it's the 14th of May 2007, and a lot of you remember a few months ago the video surfaced on the internet of BBC reporter Jane Stanley on the afternoon of 9/11. About 25 minutes before Building 7 fell, she was announcing that the Salomon Brothers, or Building 7 as it's popularly known, had fallen.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. And it seems that this was not a result of a new attack. It was because the building had been weakened during this morning's attacks. We'll probably find out more now about that from our correspondent Jane Stanley. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. There's almost a sense downtown in New York behind me, down by the World Trade Centers, of just an area completely closed off as the rescue workers try to do their job. But this isn't the first building that has suffered as a result. We know that part of the Marriott Hotel next to the World Trade Center also collapsed as a result of this huge amount of falling debris from 110 floors of the two twin towers of the World Trade Center. As you can see behind me, the Trade Center appears to be still burning. We see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline, a symbol of the financial prosperity of this city, but completely disappeared now, and New York is still unable to take on board what has happened to them today.
And then as soon as there was some confusion, it was obvious that it hadn't fallen, the satellite magically cut out and they lost their connection.
Very, very traumatized people. That has hit them very, very hard.
Jane, I think many of us, when we heard the news, perhaps on the radio earlier today, were completely flabbergasted by it and just couldn't comprehend it. I mean, it almost sounded too far-fetched. I was wondering what it's felt like for you being in Manhattan. Well, unfortunately, I think we've lost the line with Jane Stanley in Manhattan. Perhaps we can rejoin.
Then a lot of the so-called 9/11 debunkers, who are really a group of congenital liars and manufacturers and projectors, claimed that it was a blue screen behind her, though you could see the window sills and clearly see it was out the window, and she was saying it was. BBC later admitted that it was indeed out a window, but they still say that's not the case. They say it's a blue screen, that they were just showing a video from earlier live after it had collapsed. Then another BBC channel, BBC 24, also reported live on the ground that Building 7 was going to fall 20 plus minutes before it fell.
Saliba, again, as you're talking, news is continuing to come in, as you can imagine. We're now being told that yet another enormous building in New York has collapsed. It is the 47-story Salomon Brothers building, which was situated very close to the World Trade Center, right there in this financial capital. Professor Liebert, the implications of what...
And then it came out that an hour plus before, Aaron Brown of CNN had reported it.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing. And you, to be honest, can see these pictures a little bit more clearly than I, but building number 7, one of the buildings in this very large complex of buildings that is the Trade Center, there were, and that is the right way to put it, there were the two towers, but then there are a number of support buildings around it, retail spaces, restaurants, office space, garages. The trains come in from New Jersey, bringing commuters, taking commuters back, come into the complex that is the World Trade Center, and now we are told that there's a fire there, and that building may collapse as well, as you can see.
Now new video has come out from that evening, hours after Building 7 did collapse, and she starts talking about its collapse again, and her audio cuts out, which is a little bit suspicious. Now people say, what's the importance of all this? It shows media scripting, because the firemen, the police, The medical workers all reported they were told Building 7 was going to be brought down in a controlled demolition to, quote, save buildings around it. But the official story says fire brought it down. But then NIST says and FEMA says they don't know how that could possibly happen. And then on top of it, if they did say that they blew it up, how'd they get bombs in just a few hours inside a burning building? So that's why this is important. So here is the new video.
Well, in New York, the rescue effort is really just getting underway after the collapse of not just the World Trade Center's Twin Towers, but also the 47-story Solomon building next door to it. For the latest, we can go now to New York and join our correspondent, Jane Stanley. Jane, bring us up to date, if you can, on what's happening now.
Well, we still have no further concrete word on casualty figures, as you said, though people are expecting very horrific numbers. But just down behind me, where the World Trade Center towers used to be, we can still see a thick plume of smoke and of ash in the air, and queues of rescue vehicles, heavy lifting gear being brought in, reinforcements of police in buses and cars, ambulances, all the emergency services getting in. And we know that the mayor of the city, Rudolph Giuliani, and the governor of New York have been appealing for any medical staff in the area to come here to help out, because we've already seen several thousand people being treated in a tent hospital out in New York Bay, and we know that some of those are New York City police officers. We think about 100, and we have unconfirmed as yet reports that as many as 200 firefighters may have been killed and 70 police officers are missing. They were emergency personnel around the building when the towers fell down. So New York in a state of panic and of great grief.
After the collapse of the Solomon building, Jane, are the other buildings in that area stable? Hello, Jane?
Nada.
No, I think we've lost Jane Stanley in New York. We'll try and get back to her later. Deborah.
Thanks for watching these new updates. We'll be doing these multiple times a week on key stories of great import. And thanks for visiting Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.tv. You can see all of our videos at PrisonPlanet.tv.